The morning of September 15th, 2024, dawned crisp and clear over the Colorado Rockies, perfect conditions for the type of technical rock climbing that had brought Marcus Chen and his team to the remote Devil's Canyon area. As one of Colorado's most experienced rescue climbers, Marcus had scaled these peaks dozens of times over the past decade, but what he discovered that morning would challenge everything he thought he knew about the mountains that had been his second home for 20 years. "Jesus Christ," Marcus whispered into his radio headset as he rappelled down the sheer rock face of Cathedral Peak, nearly 800 feet above the canyon floor. "Base camp, you're not going to believe what I'm seeing." Jessica Park, Marcus's climbing partner and the lead coordinator for their search and rescue training exercise, crackled back through the radio. "What's your situation, Marcus? You sound like you've seen a ghost." "I think I have," Marcus replied, adjusting his position on the cliff face to get a better view of what had stopped him cold during his descent. "There's a car down here, Jess. A whole damn car, and it's hanging in mid-air." The silence that followed Marcus's report stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Jessica's voice came back, skeptical but concerned. "Marcus, clarify your position. Are you saying you see a car at the base of the canyon?" "Negative. I'm saying there's a 1990s sedan suspended by steel cables approximately 50 feet below my current position, maybe 30 feet out from the cliff face. It's a blue Honda Accord, Colorado plates, and it's been here for a long time." Marcus Chen had been part of Colorado search and rescue for 15 years and had discovered his share of vehicles that had gone off mountain roads, usually crumpled at the bottom of ravines or wedged between rocks after rolling down steep slopes. But he had never seen anything like this. A car that appeared to be deliberately suspended in mid-air, hanging like some kind of macabre art installation against the canyon wall. Using his telephoto camera, Marcus captured detailed photos of the suspended vehicle while maintaining his position on the climbing rope. The car was weathered but structurally intact, its windows opaque with years of accumulated dust and debris. Most unnervingly, it swayed slightly in the mountain wind, the steel cables creaking audibly in the morning stillness. "Base camp, I need immediate contact with the Colorado State Patrol and the County Sheriff's Office. This is definitely a crime scene, and it's going to require specialized equipment to investigate properly." Detective Ray Kowalski of the Larimer County Sheriff's Office arrived at Devil's Canyon 3 hours later, accompanied by a team of technical rescue specialists and crime scene investigators. At 52 years old, Kowalski had worked every type of case imaginable in his 25 years of law enforcement, but the photos Marcus Chen had transmitted from his clifftop position showed him something unprecedented. "In all my years working these mountains," Detective Kowalski told his team as they set up their investigation base camp, "I've never seen anything like this. Someone went to extraordinary lengths to place that vehicle in that specific location." Dr. Amanda Ross, the forensic specialist who had driven up from Denver specifically for this case, studied the climbing approach needed to reach the suspended car. "Detective, the logistics of getting a vehicle to that position would require extensive planning, specialized equipment, and probably multiple people with serious technical climbing experience." "Which means this wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity," Kowalski concluded. "Someone planned this very carefully." The first major breakthrough came when Marcus Chen, now working as part of the official investigation team, managed to rappel close enough to the suspended vehicle to photograph the license plate clearly. The number, Colorado CFD 4427, was immediately run through the state database. The results sent a chill through everyone involved in the investigation. "Detective," called Officer Maria Santos from the Mobile Command Unit. "That license plate comes back to a 1996 Honda Accord reported stolen in September 1997. But here's where it gets interesting. The theft report was filed as part of a missing persons case for David and Sarah Martinez, ages 29 and 28, who disappeared during their honeymoon trip through the Colorado Rockies. Detective Kowalski felt the familiar tingle that experienced investigators get when a cold case suddenly comes alive. Pull everything we have on the Martinez disappearance. I want to know every detail about what happened 27 years ago. The Martinez case file painted a picture of a couple whose disappearance had baffled investigators for decades. David Martinez, a software engineer from Phoenix, and his wife Sarah, a graphic designer, had been married on September 10, 1997, and had immediately departed for a week-long honeymoon road trip through the Colorado mountains. The couple had been driving a rental car, the same blue Honda Accord that was now hanging impossibly from a cliff face, when they vanished somewhere between Estes Park and Grand Lake on September 13, 1997. Their families had reported them missing when they failed to check into their reserved hotel in Steamboat Springs, and an extensive search of Highway 34 had found only a section of burned rubber on the asphalt and some scattered personal items that appeared to have been thrown from a moving vehicle. The original investigation treated it as a car accident, Detective Kowalski explained to Dr. Ross as they reviewed the 1997 files. The assumption was that they had gone off the road somewhere in the mountains, but despite weeks of searching with helicopters and ground teams, no trace of the vehicle was ever found. Until now, Dr. Ross observed, and the location where it was found raises some very disturbing questions. The technical challenge of reaching the suspended vehicle safely required a coordinated effort between the Sheriff's Department, state search and rescue teams, and specialized climbing experts. It took 2 full days to establish the rope systems and safety protocols necessary to allow investigators to approach the car. Dr. Ross was the first person to look inside the suspended vehicle in 27 years. "Detective?" She radioed back to the command post after spending 20 minutes documenting the car's interior. "We have 2 adult skeletons in the front seats, consistent with the missing person's description. But this wasn't a car accident. Both victims show clear signs of trauma that occurred before death. The discovery that David and Sarah Martinez had been murdered rather than killed in an accident transformed the investigation from a recovery operation into a homicide case. But the questions raised by the crime scene were unlike anything Detective Kowalski had encountered in his career. "Dr. Ross," he radioed, "how do you murder 2 people and then suspend their car from a cliff face 800 feet above a canyon floor?" "That's exactly what we need to figure out," came the reply. "But Detective, there's something else down here you need to know about. I found a camera." The camera Dr. Ross discovered wedged between the driver's seat and center console was a 1990s model 35mm film camera that had somehow survived 27 years of exposure to the elements. More importantly, it still contained a roll of undeveloped film. "If this film is intact," Dr. Ross explained as the camera was carefully transported to the forensics lab in Denver, "it could show us the last photographs David and Sarah Martinez took before their disappearance." While the film was being processed using specialized techniques designed to recover images from damaged negatives, Detective Kowalski began re-interviewing everyone connected to the original 1997 investigation. Margaret Martinez, David's mother, was now 78 years old and living in a retirement community in Scottsdale, Arizona. When Detective Kowalski called her with news that her son's remains had been found, her first response was relief, mixed with renewed grief. "Detective, I never believed David and Sarah just had an accident," Margaret told him during their phone interview. "David was an experienced mountain driver, and he was always so careful, especially with Sarah in the car. I always suspected something terrible happened to them. Mrs. Martinez, can you think of anyone who might have wanted to harm your son or daughter-in-law?" David didn't have enemies, Detective. He was a quiet gentleman who loved computers and hiking, but what, Mrs. Martinez? There was something that happened right before their wedding. Sarah had been getting strange phone calls from someone she used to know. She didn't want to talk about it much, but I could tell it was bothering her. This information hadn't appeared in the original case file, and Detective Kowalski realized the 1997 investigation may have missed crucial details about the couple's lives before their disappearance. Sarah's parents, Robert and Linda Chen, no relation to Marcus the climber, were both still alive and living in Portland, Oregon. When Detective Kowalski contacted them, they provided information that began to paint a different picture of the young couple's final days. Sarah had been very anxious about something in the weeks before the wedding, Linda Chen explained during her phone interview. She kept saying someone from her past was trying to contact her, someone she never wanted to see again. Did she explain who this person was? She mentioned an ex-boyfriend from college who had become obsessive after their breakup. His name was, let me think, Trevor something. Trevor Hodges, I believe. Sarah said he'd been calling her workplace and even showed up at her apartment a few times. Trevor Hodges. The name hadn't appeared anywhere in the 1997 case file, but Detective Kowalski now had a potential suspect with motive and apparent opportunity. A background check on Trevor Hodges revealed a man with a history of stalking behaviors and domestic violence. In 1997, he'd been 32 years old, working as a construction foreman with extensive experience in rigging and cable work. Most significantly, he had lived in Denver and was an experienced rock climber. Everything about Trevor Hodges fits the profile of someone who could have committed this crime, Detective Kowalski explained to Dr. Ross. He had the technical skills, the geographic knowledge, and a documented history of obsessive behavior towards Sarah Martinez. But when they tried to locate Trevor Hodges for questioning, they discovered he had died in a climbing accident in Utah in 2003, 6 years after the Martinez murders. Dead suspects make for complicated cases, Dr. Ross observed, but at least we know we're looking in the right direction. The breakthrough that would crack the case wide open came when the forensics lab successfully recovered images from the camera found in the suspended car. Of the 24 exposures on the roll of film, 18 were recoverable, and what they showed provided a chilling timeline of the Martinez couple's final hours. The first photos showed David and Sarah enjoying their honeymoon trip, pictures of them at scenic overlooks, hiking on mountain trails, and posing with their rental car at various tourist stops. The images captured a happy young couple celebrating the beginning of their life together, but the final 6 photos told a very different story. Photo 18 showed David and Sarah standing beside their car on what appeared to be a remote mountain road, with a man visible in the background approaching them. The man's face was partially obscured, but his build and posture were consistent with what investigators knew about Trevor Hodges. Photo 19 showed the same man, now closer to the couple, with David apparently trying to shield Sarah while gesturing for the man to stay back. Photo 20 captured what appeared to be a physical confrontation, with David on the ground and the unknown man grabbing Sarah's arm. Photos 21 through 23 were blurred, apparently taken during a struggle, but they showed clear evidence of violence and what appeared to be David Martinez fighting for his and his wife's lives. The final photo, number 24, was the most chilling of all. It showed the interior of the car from the perspective of someone sitting in the back seat, with David and Sarah visible in the front seats. Both appeared to be unconscious or worse, and a pair of hands, presumably belonging to their killer, were visible on the steering wheel. These photos are essentially a photographic record of a double homicide, Dr. Ross concluded after studying the developed images. But they also raised the question of how the camera ended up in the car if the killer was the one who took the final photo. Detective Kowalski had a theory about that. "I think our killer wanted the photos to be found eventually. I think he wanted people to know what he had done to David and Sarah Martinez. Suspending their car from a cliff face wasn't just about hiding the evidence. It was about creating a monument to his crime." The investigation into Trevor Hodges' background revealed a man who had become increasingly unstable following his breakup with Sarah Chen before her marriage in 1995. Co-workers from his construction job reported that he had become obsessed with rock climbing and cable rigging, often working on increasingly dangerous and technically complex projects. More disturbing, investigators discovered that Hodges had taken a leave of absence from his job in Denver during the second week of September 1997, exactly when David and Sarah Martinez had disappeared. Hodges stalked them during their honeymoon, Detective Kowalski theorized. He followed them into the mountains, confronted them on a remote road, killed them, and then used his technical skills to create what he saw as a permanent memorial to his obsession. But one major question remained. How had Hodges managed to get the car to its suspension point? The answer came from Dr. Amanda Ross's detailed analysis of the steel cables and rigging system that had held the Honda Accord in place for 27 years. The cables and hardware are consistent with professional construction-grade equipment from the mid-1990s, she explained. But more importantly, the anchor points drilled into the rock face show tool marks that indicate they were placed by someone with extensive experience in mountain construction projects. Dr. Ross's reconstruction of the crime showed that Hodges had likely killed David and Sarah on the mountain road, driven their car to a location above the canyon, and then used a complex system of pulleys and cables to lower the vehicle to its final position. The entire operation would have required several hours and extensive pre-planning. This wasn't a crime of passion, Dr. Ross concluded. This was a carefully orchestrated murder designed to ensure that David and Sarah Martinez would never be found, or if they were found, it would be in a location that would serve as a permanent reminder of their killer's technical prowess. The case took an unexpected turn when investigators discovered that Trevor Hodges had kept detailed journals of his obsession with Sarah Chen and his plans for revenge against her and her new husband. Hodges' apartment, which had been cleaned out after his death in 2003, had left behind a storage unit that his estranged family had never claimed. When Detective Kowalski obtained a warrant to search the unit, they found boxes of photographs of Sarah, detailed maps of Colorado mountain roads, and most damning of all, technical drawings showing exactly how to suspend a vehicle from the canyon wall where the Martinez car had been discovered. The journals revealed a man consumed by jealousy and rage who had spent months planning what he saw as the perfect revenge against the woman who had rejected him and the man who had taken his place. "September 13th will be their last day together," read one entry dated 2 weeks before the murders. "They think they can be happy while I suffer, but they don't understand that some people can't be allowed to just walk away from what they've done to others." As the investigation into Trevor Hodges continued, Detective Kowalski realized they were dealing with one of the most premeditated and technically complex murders in Colorado history. But they were also dealing with a killer who had been dead for over 20 years, leaving a trail of evidence that could provide closure for families but no opportunity for justice through the courts. The discovery of David and Sarah Martinez's remains after 27 years brought both relief and renewed grief to their families. Margaret Martinez, David's elderly mother, flew to Colorado to claim her son's remains and finally lay him to rest. "I always knew someone had hurt them," she told Detective Kowalski during their meeting. "David would never have just driven off a cliff. He was too careful, too responsible, but I never imagined anyone could be so cruel as to do what this man did." Sarah's parents, Robert and Linda Chen, expressed similar feelings of vindication mixed with horror at the details of their daughter's final hours. "We failed Sarah when we didn't take her seriously about Trevor Hodges bothering her," Linda Chen said through tears. "We thought it was just normal ex-boyfriend drama. We didn't realize how dangerous he was." The Martinez case became a textbook example of how advanced forensic techniques and persistent investigation could solve even the most complex cold cases. But it also served as a stark reminder of how domestic stalking situations can escalate to deadly violence when warning signs are missed or ignored. As Chapter 1 of the investigation concluded, Detective Kowalski knew that while they had identified the killer and understood his methods, there were still questions that needed answers. How had Hodges tracked the couple through the mountains? Had he acted alone? And most importantly, what could be learned from this case to prevent similar tragedies in the future? The suspended car had been a monument to obsession and murder, hanging in the Colorado mountains for nearly 3 decades. But now it would become something else entirely. Evidence in a case that would change how law enforcement approached stalking cases and missing persons investigations in remote areas. David and Sarah Martinez had been given a voice from beyond the grave, and their story would ensure that their killer's carefully planned crime would ultimately serve as a cautionary tale rather than the twisted monument he had intended to create. The storage unit that had belonged to Trevor Hodges sat like a tomb in a Denver self-storage facility, untouched for over 20 years since his death in Utah. When Detective Ray Kowalski and Dr. Amanda Ross entered Unit 247 on September 22, 2024, they were prepared to find evidence of obsession, but what they discovered exceeded their darkest expectations. "Jesus," Dr. Ross whispered as she surveyed the contents under the harsh fluorescent lighting. "This isn't just evidence of stalking. This is the archive of someone who planned a perfect murder." The unit was meticulously organized, with labeled boxes containing hundreds of photographs of Sarah Chen, dating back to their college relationship in 1994. But it was the technical documentation that made Detective Kowalski's blood run cold. Hodges had created detailed engineering drawings showing multiple methods for suspending vehicles from cliff faces, complete with load calculations, cable specifications, and anchor point requirements. One set of drawings, dated August 1997, showed the exact canyon location where David and Sarah Martinez's car had been found. "Look at this," Detective Kowalski called, pointing to a hand-drawn map of Colorado mountain highways. He marked every scenic overlook, every remote pull-off, every location where a couple might stop during a romantic road trip. Dr. Ross was examining a timeline chart that Hodges had created tracking Sarah's daily routines. He knew where she worked, what route she took home, where she shopped, even where she got her car serviced. This level of surveillance would have taken months to compile. But the most disturbing discovery came when they opened a box labeled "Practice Runs." Inside were photographs and detailed notes documenting at least 6 occasions when Hodges had tested his cliff suspension system using abandoned cars and construction materials. "He treated this like an engineering project," Dr. Ross observed. "Each test was more sophisticated than the last, with improvements to the rigging system and anchor placement." One photograph showed Hodges himself rappelling down a cliff face while supervising the placement of a test vehicle. The image was dated March 1997, 6 months before the Martinez murders. Detective Kowalski found a notebook filled with Hodges' handwriting that read like a technical manual for murder. The entry for September 10, 1997, the day David and Sarah were married, contained a chilling assessment. "Final preparations complete. Weather forecast optimal for September 13th operation. Subjects will be traveling Highway 34 between 2 to 4 p.m. based on hotel reservation schedule." He knew their exact itinerary. Detective Kowalski realized. This wasn't a chance encounter on a mountain road. He orchestrated every detail of when and where he would intercept them. Doctor. Ross had discovered another box containing what appeared to be surveillance equipment from the 1990s. Long-range cameras, radio scanners, and GPS tracking devices that were extremely advanced for their time. This equipment would have cost thousands of dollars in 1997, she noted. Hodges didn't just plan this murder, he invested heavily in the technology to make it work. A detailed financial analysis of Hodges' bank records from 1996 to 1997 showed large cash withdrawals and purchases from specialized climbing equipment suppliers, electronics stores, and industrial cable manufacturers. The investigation took a disturbing turn when they discovered that the Martinez case might not have been Hodges' only victim. Hidden in the back of the storage unit was a file box labeled Other Projects. Inside were newspaper clippings about unsolved disappearances in Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming between 1995 and 2002. All involved couples who had vanished during mountain recreation trips. "Detective," Dr. Ross said, her voice tight with concern, "I count at least 8 cases here that have similar patterns to the Martinez disappearance. Each case file contained the same type of detailed surveillance notes, technical drawings, and location scouting photographs that had characterized Hodges' preparation for the Martinez murders." Detective Kowalski immediately contacted the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit to coordinate a multi-state investigation into what appeared to be a series of connected crimes. Agent Sarah Mitchell arrived from Denver the next day to review the evidence from Hodges' storage unit. With 15 years of experience profiling serial killers, Agent Mitchell quickly recognized the significance of what they had discovered. Trevor Hodges wasn't just a stalker who escalated to murder, she explained to the investigation team. He was a serial killer who used intimate relationships as a method for selecting victims. The Martinez case may have been personal, but the others were practice runs or crimes of opportunity. Agent Mitchell's preliminary analysis of the newspaper clippings revealed a pattern that had gone undetected for decades. Between 1995 and 2002, 7 couples had vanished during mountain recreation trips in Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. All had been experienced hikers or climbers, all had disappeared from remote locations, and none of their vehicles had ever been found. Hodges perfected his method over time, Agent Mitchell theorized. He would identify couples engaged in high-risk outdoor activities, conduct surveillance to learn their patterns, and then intercept them in remote locations where their disappearance could be attributed to natural causes. The breakthrough that would expose the full extent of Hodges' crimes came when Dr. Ross made a connection between the technical drawings found in his storage unit and several unsolved cases from the late 1990s. "Look at this," she said, spreading out maps and technical drawings on the conference table. Hodges created suspension systems for at least 4 different canyon locations across 3 states. If he was using the same method for multiple murders, we should be able to find more suspended vehicles. Using high-resolution satellite imagery and drone surveys, search teams began investigating the remote canyon locations identified in Hodges' technical drawings. The first discovery came at Black Canyon in Utah, where drone operators found the remains of a pickup truck suspended from a cliff face in almost identical fashion to the Martinez vehicle. The truck's license plates matched those of Robert and Jennifer Walsh, a couple from Salt Lake City who had disappeared during a camping trip in October 1998. The second discovery was even more disturbing. In a remote canyon in Wyoming, searchers found not 1, but 2 vehicles suspended from the same cliff system, a Jeep Cherokee and a Ford Explorer that had belonged to 2 different couples who had vanished in 1999 and 2000. Hodges created a graveyard in the sky, Agent Mitchell observed grimly. He was using these remote canyons as his personal museum of murder. With each new discovery, the technical sophistication of Hodges' crimes became more apparent. The Wyoming site showed evidence of a permanent rigging system that could be used repeatedly, with permanently installed anchor points and cached equipment. Dr. Ross's analysis of the rigging systems showed continuous improvement and refinement. He was treating each murder as a learning experience, perfecting his technique with each victim. The investigation expanded to include forensic anthropologists and technical climbing experts from across the western United States. What they were uncovering represented one of the most unusual and technically complex serial killing cases in American criminal history. But the discovery that would provide the most insight into Hodges' psychology came when investigators found his audio journals hidden in a waterproof container at the bottom of his storage unit. The recordings, made on cassette tapes between 1996 and 2002, provided a chilling first-person account of how Hodges selected, stalked, and murdered his victims. "I'm not like other killers," Hodges' voice said in one recording, dated January 1998. "I don't leave bodies scattered around for police to find. I create art. Each installation is carefully planned and executed to become a permanent monument to my work." The tapes revealed that Hodges saw himself as an artist whose medium was murder, and whose gallery was the mountain wilderness of the American West. "The couples I choose are all the same type," he continued in another recording. "Happy, successful in love. They represent everything I can never have, so they become my raw materials for creating something beautiful and permanent." The audio journals also contained detailed post-crime analysis where Hodges critiqued his own work and planned improvements for future murders. "The Martinez installation was my masterpiece," he said in a recording made shortly after the September 1997 murders. "The personal connection added emotional depth to the work. But I need to be more careful about leaving evidence. Next time, no cameras." Agent Mitchell's psychological profile of Hodges painted a picture of a highly intelligent narcissist who had channeled his rage over romantic rejection into an elaborate fantasy of artistic expression through murder. "He wasn't killing out of passion or immediate anger," she explained. "He was killing to create what he saw as permanent art installations that would preserve his victims in a state of eternal punishment." The scale of Hodges' crimes became clear when the multi-state investigation identified potential victims. Between 1995 and 2002, 11 couples had vanished during mountain recreation trips in locations that corresponded to Hodges' surveillance notes and technical drawings. Recovery operations were launched at 6 different canyon sites across Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. The logistical challenges were enormous, requiring specialized equipment and experienced technical rescue teams to reach vehicles suspended hundreds of feet above canyon floors. By October 2024, investigators had recovered the remains of 18 people from 7 different vehicles suspended in remote canyon locations. DNA analysis confirmed that all were couples who had been reported missing during mountain recreation trips between 1995 and 2002. This represents one of the largest serial killing cases in the history of the Mountain West, Agent Mitchell announced during a press conference. Trevor Hodges murdered at least 18 people over a 7-year period, using technical climbing skills to create what he saw as permanent monuments to his crimes. The families of Hodges' victims experienced a complex mix of relief and renewed grief as their loved ones were finally found after decades of uncertainty. Michael Walsh, whose parents Robert and Jennifer had vanished in Utah in 1998, traveled from California to witness the recovery of their remains. "I was 12 when they disappeared," he told investigators. "I've spent 26 years wondering what happened to them, whether they suffered, whether they were still alive somewhere. Finally, knowing the truth is both terrible and necessary. The investigation also revealed how Hodges had been able to commit so many murders without detection. His work as a construction foreman provided legitimate reasons for being in remote mountain locations with specialized equipment. His expertise in rock climbing and rigging meant he could access locations that would be impossible for most people to reach. More disturbing, Hodges had deliberately chosen locations where missing persons cases would be attributed to natural causes rather than foul play. Mountain wilderness areas were already known for hiking and climbing accidents, making his victims' disappearances seem like tragic but explainable occurrences. He exploited the assumption that people who go missing in the mountains have had accidents, Dr. Ross explained. By making his victims' vehicles impossible to find using conventional search methods, he ensured that their cases would go cold quickly. The technical analysis of Hodges' crime scenes revealed the extent of his preparation and planning. Each suspension system was engineered to last for decades, with redundant safety systems to ensure the vehicles would remain in place indefinitely. He built these installations to last forever, Dr. Ross observed. In his twisted mind, he was creating permanent memorials to his victims that would hang in the mountains long after he was gone. The investigation also uncovered evidence that Hodges had documented his crimes through photography and video, creating what amounted to a private museum of murder that he could revisit and study. He treated each crime scene like a work of art that needed to be preserved and studied, Agent Mitchell explained. The photographs and videos weren't just trophies, they were reference materials for improving his technique. The discovery of Hodges' extensive documentation provided unprecedented insight into the mind of a serial killer, but it also raised disturbing questions about whether he had shared his methods with others. Analysis of his personal correspondence and computer files revealed contact with several individuals who shared his interest in technical climbing and what he euphemistically referred to as extreme installation art. We're investigating whether Hodges had accomplices or whether he inspired copycat killers, Agent Mitchell said. The technical knowledge required for these crimes suggests he may have been part of a larger network of individuals with similar interests. As Chapter 2 of the investigation concluded, law enforcement officials realized they were dealing with something unprecedented in American criminal history. A serial killer who had used advanced technical skills and intimate knowledge of mountain geography to commit perfect murders that remained undetected for decades. The suspended vehicles found in remote canyons represented more than just crime scenes. They were monuments to a twisted artistic vision that had turned the natural beauty of the American Mountain West into a gallery of death. But with Trevor Hodges dead for over 20 years, the investigation faced a unique challenge. How do you seek justice for 18 victims when their killer is beyond the reach of the law? The answer would come in the final phase of the investigation, when detectives would discover that Hodges' death in Utah in 2003 might not have been the accident it appeared to be, and that his story had one final, shocking twist that would change everything they thought they knew about the case. The call came to Detective Ray Kowalski at 6:47 a.m. on November 3, 2024, from Detective Maria Santos of the Grand County Sheriff's Office in Moab, Utah. What she told him would turn everything they thought they knew about Trevor Hodges upside down. "Detective Kowalski, you're going to want to sit down for this," Santos said, her voice carrying the weight of a discovery that had shaken even experienced investigators. "We've reopened the Trevor Hodges case from 2003, and what we found suggests his death wasn't an accident, it was murder." The official report from May 15, 2003, had described Hodges' death as a tragic climbing accident in Arches National Park. According to witnesses, he had been attempting a difficult solo climb when his equipment failed, sending him plummeting 400 feet to his death. The case had been closed quickly, with investigators finding no evidence of foul play. But 21 years later, armed with knowledge of Hodges' true nature as a serial killer, Detective Santos and her team had begun asking different questions about the circumstances of his death. The witness statements never made sense, Santos explained to Kowalski during their video conference. 3 different people claimed to have seen Hodges climbing alone, but their descriptions of his location and equipment were inconsistent. More importantly, the climbing route they described was one that Hodges, with his technical expertise, would never have attempted solo. The reinvestigation had been triggered by a letter received by the Grand County Sheriff's Office in October 2024, shortly after news of the Martinez case discoveries had made national headlines. The letter was from a man named James Chen, no relation to Sarah Martinez's family. Now 68 years old and living in Salt Lake City. In 2003, he had been a 47-year-old father whose daughter Lisa and her boyfriend had vanished during a camping trip in Colorado, one of the couples later identified as Hodges' victims. "I've kept silent for 21 years, Chen's letter began, but seeing the news about all those suspended cars has brought back memories I tried to bury. I need to tell someone what really happened to Trevor Hodges." James Chen's story, told during a recorded interview at the Grand County Sheriff's Office, revealed a conspiracy of justice that law enforcement had never suspected. When Lisa disappeared in 2001, the police told us it was probably a hiking accident, Chen explained to Detective Santos, but I never believed it. Lisa was an experienced outdoors person, and she was too careful to just vanish without a trace. Chen had spent 2 years conducting his own investigation into his daughter's disappearance, using vacation time and personal resources to search Colorado mountain areas where Lisa and her boyfriend had last been seen. "I hired private investigators, consulted with search and rescue teams, even brought in psychics," Chen continued. "Nothing worked through official channels, but I couldn't give up on finding my daughter." In early 2003, Chen's private investigation had led him to Trevor Hodges. "I'd been tracking down everyone who had been in the area when Lisa disappeared," Chen explained. Hodges' name kept coming up in construction worker databases. He'd been working on several projects near where Lisa was last seen. Chen had begun conducting his own surveillance of Hodges, following him during climbing trips and documenting his activities. What he discovered had horrified him. "I watched him scouting remote canyon locations, testing rigging equipment, taking photographs of couples at trailheads," Chen said. "I knew I was watching a predator in action." But James Chen hadn't been conducting his investigation alone. During his search for Lisa, he had connected with other families whose loved ones had disappeared during mountain recreation trips. By 2003, 6 families had formed an informal network, sharing information and resources that law enforcement agencies had failed to coordinate. The group included Michael Torres, whose son and daughter-in-law had vanished in Utah in 1999. Patricia Walsh, whose sister and brother-in-law had disappeared in Wyoming in 2000, and 3 other families who had lost loved ones under similar circumstances. "We called ourselves the Mountain Families," Chen explained. "We met monthly, shared our investigations, and gradually began to see patterns that the police had missed." By spring 2003, the Mountain Families had identified Trevor Hodges as a person of interest in multiple disappearances. But when they approached law enforcement with their suspicions, they were dismissed as grief-stricken families seeing connections that didn't exist. "The police told us we were conspiracy theorists," Chen said bitterly. "They said we were letting our grief cloud our judgment, but we knew Hodges was our connection." The decision to take justice into their own hands had been made during a meeting on May 10, 2003, just 5 days before Hodges' death in Utah. "We agreed that if law enforcement wouldn't act, we would," Chen admitted. "We weren't vigilantes looking for revenge. We were parents trying to stop a monster from killing more children. The plan they developed was as carefully orchestrated as anything Hodges himself had conceived. Michael Torres, a retired Army Ranger with extensive climbing experience, had volunteered to be the one who would confront Hodges during his climbing trip to Arches National Park. The other families would serve as lookouts and witnesses, ensuring that Hodges' death would appear to be an accident. Mike Torres was a decorated veteran who had lost his son to this killer, Chen explained. He said he had nothing left to lose and everything to gain by stopping Hodges permanently. The confrontation between Torres and Hodges had taken place on a remote climbing route in Arches National Park on the morning of May 15, 2003. According to Chen's account, Torres had approached Hodges while he was preparing for a climb, identified himself as the father of one of Hodges' victims, and demanded to know what had happened to his son. Mike had photographs of all the missing couples, Chen said. He showed them to Hodges and told him he knew what he'd been doing. Hodges didn't deny anything. According to Mike, he actually seemed proud of his work. The confrontation had escalated when Hodges attempted to flee, leading to a physical struggle on the cliff face. Mike said Hodges pulled a knife and tried to cut his climbing rope. Chen continued. In the struggle, Hodges fell. Mike tried to grab him but couldn't reach him in time. Torres had immediately contacted the other Mountain family's members, who had coordinated their witness statements to make Hodges' death appear accidental. We knew that if the truth came out, Mike would go to prison for murder, even though he was trying to stop a serial killer, Chen explained. We made a pact to protect him and take the secret to our graves. But the weight of that secret had become unbearable for James Chen after seeing the news coverage of the Martinez case discoveries. 18 people, Chen said, his voice breaking. Hodges killed 18 innocent people and turned their deaths into some kind of sick art project. Mike Torres was a hero who stopped a monster, but he's been carrying the guilt of taking a life for 21 years. Detective Santos immediately contacted Michael Torres, now 71 years old and living in Phoenix, Arizona. When confronted with Chen's confession, Torres initially denied involvement, but eventually agreed to tell his version of the events. I never intended to kill Trevor Hodges, Torres told investigators during a recorded interview. I wanted him to confess, to tell us where he had put our children, so we could finally lay them to rest. Torres' account largely corroborated Chen's story, but provided additional details about Hodges' final moments. When I showed him the pictures of all the missing couples, he smiled, Torres said. He told me I should be proud that my son had become part of his mountain gallery. He said David was suspended in a beautiful location where he would be admired for centuries. The confrontation had turned violent when Hodges revealed that he had detailed plans for future installations, including specific families he was already surveilling. He had a notebook with photographs of new targets, Torres said, couples he was planning to kill. I realized that if I let him walk away, more people would die. The struggle that followed had been brief but decisive. When Hodges attempted to escape by rappelling down the cliff face, Torres had grabbed his rope, causing the equipment failure that led to Hodges' fatal fall. I watched him fall 400 feet, Torres said quietly. I should have felt satisfaction, but all I felt was sadness that it had come to that. The revelation that Hodges had been murdered by a victim's family member created a complex legal and ethical situation for law enforcement. Agent Sarah Mitchell, who had been leading the FBI's investigation into Hodges' crimes, found herself facing unprecedented circumstances. We have a serial killer who murdered 18 people and a grieving father who killed the serial killer to prevent future murders, she explained to her superiors. The question isn't whether Michael Torres committed homicide. He did. The question is whether justice is served by prosecuting him. The decision ultimately came from the highest levels of the Department of Justice. After reviewing all evidence from both the Hodges murders and the circumstances of his death, federal prosecutors announced that no charges would be filed against Michael Torres or the other Mountain family's members. Mr. Torres and his co-conspirators took the law into their own hands, which is never acceptable in a civilized society, the prosecutor's statement read. However, their actions prevented what evidence suggests would have been additional murders by one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. The announcement sparked national debate about vigilante justice and the limits of law enforcement in protecting citizens from serial predators. But for the families of Hodges' victims, the revelation brought a sense of closure that had been impossible while they believed their loved one's killer had died in an accident. Margaret Martinez, David's elderly mother, was among those who supported Torres's actions. "Michael Torres did what the police couldn't or wouldn't do," she said during a television interview. "He stopped a monster who had already killed my son and 17 other innocent people. I don't consider him a murderer. I consider him a hero." Sarah's parents, Robert and Linda Chen, expressed similar sentiments. "We wish the justice system had stopped Trevor Hodges before he killed our daughter," Linda Chen said. "But since it didn't, we're grateful that someone did." The Mountain family's network, which had operated in secrecy for over 20 years, was revealed to be far more extensive than initially known. Their informal investigation had identified other potential serial killers targeting outdoor recreation enthusiasts, leading to 3 additional arrests by federal authorities. These families created their own intelligence network because law enforcement agencies weren't sharing information across jurisdictions, Agent Mitchell explained. In some ways, they were more effective at identifying patterns than we were. The discovery of the Mountain family's activities led to significant changes in how missing persons cases are investigated in remote areas. Federal agencies now maintain databases that track disappearances across state lines, looking for patterns that might indicate serial criminal activity. The locations where Hodges had suspended his victims' vehicles became official crime scenes, but they also became something else, memorials to the 18 people whose lives had been cut short by one man's twisted artistic vision. Each canyon site was marked with plaques identifying the victims and telling their stories, not as anonymous casualties of a serial killer, but as individuals who had been loved and whose lives had meaning. The technical climbing community, which had unknowingly harbored Hodges for years, established new protocols for reporting suspicious behavior and monitoring access to remote climbing locations. "We failed to recognize that someone was using our skills and our community to commit murder," said Dr. Rebecca Stone, president of the American Alpine Club. "We have a responsibility to ensure this never happens again." Michael Torres, who had carried the weight of killing Hodges for 21 years, found an unexpected measure of peace in the revelation of his actions. "I never regretted stopping Trevor Hodges," he said during a final interview, "but I regretted having to do it alone, in secret. Now that the truth is out, I can finally honor my son's memory without feeling like I dishonored myself." The Torres family established a foundation dedicated to supporting families of missing persons, with particular focus on cases involving suspected serial killers. James Chen, whose confession had triggered the revelation of the Mountain family's actions, became an advocate for victims' rights and criminal justice reform. "The system failed all of us," he said, "but we found a way to save future victims, even if we couldn't save our own children." As the investigation into Trevor Hodges' crimes and death concluded, law enforcement officials acknowledged that the case had challenged conventional notions of justice and law enforcement. This case shows us that sometimes the line between victim and perpetrator, between justice and revenge, isn't as clear as we'd like it to be. Detective Kowalski reflected. The Mountain families committed crimes to prevent worse crimes. It's not a precedent we want to set, but it's hard to argue with the results. The suspended cars were finally brought down from their cliff-face perches, ending their decades-long service as monuments to murder. But the memories of David and Sarah Martinez and the 16 other victims of Trevor Hodges would be preserved in a different way, as reminders of the importance of protecting those we love and the lengths to which people will go to seek justice when the system fails them. The final report on the Martinez Cliff mystery filled over 800 pages and became required reading at the FBI Academy for courses on serial killer investigation and victim advocacy. But perhaps the most fitting memorial to Hodges' victims was the network of families who had refused to let their loved ones be forgotten, who had sought truth when officials offered only theories, and who had ultimately delivered the justice that the legal system could not provide. 27 years after David and Sarah Martinez disappeared during their honeymoon, they had finally found peace, not hanging from a cliff face as monuments to a killer's twisted artistry, but remembered as victims whose families never gave up the fight for justice. The mountains of Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming returned to being places of natural beauty rather than galleries of death. And somewhere in those peaks, the spirits of 18 innocent people could finally rest, knowing that their killer's final installation had been his own demise, orchestrated by those who loved the victims most. Trevor Hodges had planned the perfect murders, but he had not planned for the perfect justice that would ultimately find him. In the end, his victims' families had created the most fitting memorial of all, the knowledge that love and determination can triumph over even the most carefully constructed evil.